Thank you, Mr. Gordon, members of the Commission. My name is John Geesman. I'm appearing today on behalf of the Alliance for Nuclear Responsibility. Our position is perhaps a bit more nuanced than even Dr. Gibson's. We are in support of the studies. I want to make that emphatically clear. My client has been associated with this project since Senator Blakesley first introduced his legislation, worked quite closely with the California Energy Commission, on which I served, as the Energy Commission took up implementing AB 1632, has participated in the Public Utilities Commission proceeding whereby PG&E is seeking $64 million of customer funds to pay for the studies. My client has no doubt about the importance of these surveys. Some 50 years ago, Public Utilities Commission and your predecessors, the State Lands Commission, considered this a suitable site for a nuclear power plant. On the Pacific Rim of Fire, where the USGS says 90% of all earthquakes in the world take place. We ought to adopt an appropriate level of humility for those decisions. Frankly, they just didn't know any better. But we've learned a lot about seismicity since the building permit was first applied for this plant. And we can learn a lot more through these studies. And that's why my client quite strongly supports the notion of going forward with the enhanced 3D survey technique. My client's position is that it is not ripe today for you to make that decision. The reason for that is the Public Utilities Commission still has important information in front of it to determine the appropriate scope of the surveys. My client sponsored the expert testimony of Dr. Douglas Hamilton in the PUC proceeding. Who is Dr. Hamilton? He's a PhD geologist from Stanford University who for nearly 20 years was a part of the PG&E geotechnical licensing team for the original license, Diablo Canyon. In the wake of Fukushima, he came forward to us, something of a seismic Daniel Ellsberg, and said, you know, there were some things that we didn't adequately consider. And the recently discovered shoreline fault data reinforces his conviction that important seismic information was overlooked or underplayed at the time of the original licensing and could greatly benefit from exposure to the 3D seismic enhanced studies. His view is that the Diablo Cove fault, which goes directly under the reactor, is the most serious seismic threat to the facility, and that important enhancements of the 3D surveys could determine what magnitude of risk that fault indeed poses. What was PG&E's reaction? Well, initially they moved to strike his testimony as irrelevant to the proceeding. The PUC didn't allow that. Then they asked for a delay in the proceeding so they could evaluate his testimony. When their testimony came back, they determined that, well, he actually had some pretty good ideas that they'd planned to investigate all along. And you'll see on the material that I have provided you, which is from the public comments to your draft EIR, the cross-examination of PG&E's witness, Dr. Stuart Nishenko, in which he agrees that their studies will take into account Dr. Hamilton's concerns. We posed that to your staff after the PUC hearings. Your staff indicated it does not have the authority to direct PG&E to study those areas. Okay, there's no question that the Public Utilities Commission does, and you ought to defer your decision until the PUC process is over, which should be later this fall, Now, what are the consequences of delay? Well, you'd have a chance to take into account the peer review suggested by Dr. Gibson. PG&E tried to rush this process because of concern that the ship would not be available next year. If you look at the National Science Foundation's environmental assessment of Southern California Edison's project, they intend to use the same ship. And that ship is going to be available not just this year, but it'll be available next year. Edison plans to use it on the coast of California to review its project next fall. It's my client's position that the prudent choice today, hold off. Wait until the Public Utilities Commission has had a chance to decide. Let's see if they direct PG&E to study Dr. Hamilton's concerns. Let's see if PG&E on its own initiative chooses to stand with its word under oath PUC testimony that it will incorporate his concerns. I thank you very much for your time and for the excellent work of your staff.